Oh, hey, long time no see. How y'all doing? Um, happy to be back. This is the first video I've filmed in a long time. And this is gonna be a big content change for me. So, I hope y'all enjoy. So, in the early 1950s, the world was gripped by a terrifying new kind of warfare. It wasn't the kind fought in trenches with tanks or treaties. It was fought in the shadows, inside the human mind. The Cold War was escalating, and the Central Intelligence Agency, also known as the CIA, was absolutely terrified that the Soviet Union and China were developing methods of brainwashing. The term brainwashing had just entered the Western vocabulary, inspired by the treatment of American prisoners during the Korean conflict. The US government believed that the communists had discovered some magical, sinister technology that could strip away free will, implant new memories, and turn loyal soldiers into mindless assassins, or even just double agents. Driven by a desperate, almost pathological fear of falling behind in psychological warfare, the CIA didn't just want to defend against this technology. They wanted to build it first. This paranoia birthed an operation that would soon become one of the darkest chapters in modern intelligence history. It operated under several code names, evolving from Project Bluebird to Project Artichoke, and finally becoming the infamous Project MKUltra. Now, approved by director Alan Dulles, I'm probably butchering that name, but in April 1953, MKUltra was designed to capitalize on the emerging fields of psychiatry and pharmaceuticals. The goal was simple, yet profoundly terrifying: to develop a chemical and biological material capable of controlling or altering human functions. But what actually happened inside of the laboratories and safe houses of MKUltra? How did an intelligence agency become a rogue scientific body conducting illegal human experimentations on its own citizens? And how far did the CIA go on their quest to crack the human code? Welcome to the story of MKUltra. Let's get into that. To understand MKUltra, you have to understand the man who ran its day-to-day operations. A brilliant, complex, and deeply unsettling chemist named Dr. Sidney Gilbert. Probably butchering his name, I'm sorry. Dr. Sidney was the head of the CIA's chemical division. He had a background in agricultural chemistry and a personal interest in the altered states of consciousness. He was also a man of profound contradictions. He loved folk dancing and was a dedicated family man, yet he also was the primary architect of the CIA's most horrific human rights abuses. Dr. Sidney's fixation, and the cornerstone of much of the MKUltra research, was on a relatively new drug at the time, lysergic acid dilophamine, better known as LSD. Discovered in 1938 by Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann, LSD was a mind-altering chemical unlike anything the world had ever seen. In 1950s, excuse me for that. In the In the 1950s, the CIA believed LSD might be the ultimate truth serum, a way to break down the psychological defenses of the Soviet spies during interrogations. They also thought it could induce temporary psychosis, allowing the agency to study how to dismantle the mental stability of enemy leaders. The CIA was so amazed by the potential of LSD that Dr. Sidney orchestrated the purchase of the entire global supply of the drug. They spent millions of dollars buying up the chemical and then began distributing it to universities, hospitals, and prisons across America. But the CIA didn't just want to read academic studies about LSD. They wanted to know how it affected people in the real world, unpredictable, uncontrolled, and without the subject's knowledge. This desire led to some of the most alarming aspects of the early program: the covert testing on unknowing citizens. The CIA operatives would slip LSD into the drinks of patrons at bars, colleagues at parties, and individuals in public spaces. They wanted to see if they could control the behavior in everyday situations. Got through that one quick. One of the most famous and tragic stories of this era is that of Frank Olson, a civilian employee and biochemist for the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories at Fort Derrick. Olson worked closely with the CIA on various biological projects. In November 1953, during a retreat with his CIA colleagues at a lodge in Deep Creek Lake, Maryland, Olson's glass of alcohol was spiked. I'm so very sorry, people. This is going to be a lot. It's going to be a long video. I'm sorry. His glass was spiked with LSD by Dr. Sidney's team and his own teammates. He had no idea that he had ingested the most potent hallucinogen known to science, and he began to experience a severe, terrifying psychiatric episode. He was paranoid, agitated, and deeply disturbed by the experience, as anyone would be, you know. Following this disastrous LSD experience at Deep Creek Lake, Frank Olson's mental state continued to deteriorate. The CIA recognized that they had triggered a severe psychotic break. In an attempt to handle the situation, they brought Olson to New York City to see a CIA-affiliated doctor. The tragic events that unfolded next happened at the Hotel Sadler in Manhattan. Olson, who was suffering from a deep paranoia and a profound psychological distress, crashed through the window of his 10th floor room and fell to his death on the pavement below. Initially, his death was ruled a slide, but years later, when the MKUltra files were declassified, the true circumstances of Olson's final days sent shockwaves through the American public. Had he jumped? Was he pushed because the CIA feared he knew too much? His family fought for decades to uncover the truth, eventually forcing the government to examine his body in the 1990s. The autopsy revealed evidence of head trauma prior to the fall, adding fuel to the theory that his death was far more sinister than a drug-induced slide. The Olson case stands as one of the most prominent tragic symbols of the human cost and the CIA's unchecked experiments. But Dr. Sidney wasn't just dosing colleagues at rural retreats. He wanted to understand the intersection of sex, drugs, and blackmail in environments where people would be the most vulnerable. The objective led to one of the most bizarre and invasive, one of the most bizarre and invasive subprojects of MKUltra, Operation Midnight Climax. This operation was primarily in San Francisco and New York. The CIA set up several secure houses. They hired a notorious madam named George Hunter White, who operated under the alias Morgan Hall. The CIA rented upscale apartments and hired sex workers to bring unsuspecting men, often businessmen, scientists, and everyday citizens, back to these safe houses. Once inside, the men were given drinks laced with LSD and other psychoactive substances. While the subjects were incapacitated or hallucinating, CIA agents would sit behind a two-way mirror in an adjacent room, sipping martinis, taking notes, and recording the interactions to study the effects of the drugs on human behaviors. Operation Midnight Climax wasn't just about observing drug trips. It was a dark, twisted exercise to see if the CIA could use compromised situations to manipulate, blackmail, or extract information from regular people. The absolute disregard for the civil liberties and the well being of these individuals is staggering to comprehend. Uh, um, Before we continue with the video, I just want to say I am sorry for all the cuts. I have not started this much since, well, I think my entire life. So, yeah. Um, and yes, it is nighttime. As you can see, there's no sun. There's no nothing. I'm in, like, the void now. So, kind of fits the mood, I guess. Long as the red light. It is pretty spooky in here, if you're wondering. Everything's dark. But let me get back to let's get back to the video, okay? While LSD was a major focus, the ambition of MKUltra went far beyond hallucinogens. The CIA was obsessed with breaking the human mind completely, hoping to achieve a state called psychic driving and total behavioral modifications. To achieve this, the agency funded research into a variety of extreme, highly unethical psychiatric techniques. Perhaps one of the most harrowing examples, it has been a long, long day. As you can tell, it's nighttime. It's been a long time. Long day of filming, I'm sorry. Perhaps one of the most harrowing examples of this work was Dr. Donald Elwin Cameron. Probably butchering that name again. These are crazy names, I tell you what. At the Allen, my goodness, I'm so very sorry, people. Okay. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Canada. Cameron, a prominent psychiatrist and former president of the American Psychiatric Association, believed he could cure schizophrenia and other mental illnesses by de-patterning the human mind. He positioned that to fix a broken mind, a psychiatrist had to first erase the existing memories and personality of the patient, and then implant a new, healthy personality. Now, you may be wondering, how did Dr. Cameron plan to de-pattern his patients? Well, it was through a horrifying cocktail of treatments. First, he would subject his patients to a massive dose of electroshock therapy, often at 30 to 40 times the normal power and frequency. This wasn't the standard medical procedure, obviously. This was a pure assault on the brain designed to induce anesthesia. After the electric shocks, patients were placed in a chemically induced comas for weeks at a time, sleeping up to 20 hours a day. Then came the psychic driving. Dr. Cameron would strap headphones onto the sedated or restrained patients and played looped, repetitive audio messages continuously for days, even weeks. The tapes would play basic, fundamental. Oh, I'm sorry. I need sleep. These audio messages would continue over and over and over 1,000 times a day, attempting to drill new behaviors directly into the subconscious. The patients emerged from Allen Memorial Institute profoundly damaged. Many suffered permanent anesthesia, loss of basic life skills, and experienced a lifetime of trauma. And the most chilling part, this horrific research was heavily funded by CIA through Project MKUltra, which funneled money directly to Cameron by a front organization called the Society of Investigation for human ecology. The CIA used dozens of these front organizations. They laundered money through universities, funded foundations, and pharmaceutical companies. To keep the true nature of the funding hidden, uh, this allowed Dr. Sidney and his team to test the boundaries of the human endurance without a paper trail leading back to the CIA headquarters in Longing, Virginia. Sorry, again, for anyone that lives there. Sorry if I just butchered your town's name. I'm very sorry. Um, uh, the CIA's quest to manipulate the human mind also led them into the murky world of interrogation and truth serums. Intelligence agencies have always dreamed of a chemical that could force a person to tell the absolute truth completely against their will. That's shown in many pop culture references. Um, Under MKUltra, researchers explored a variety of other drugs and torture methods to get their point across. Um, the CIA scientists would administer these drugs to subjects to see if they could bypass conscious thought and extract highly classified secrets. The reality, however, proved highly disappointing. The truth serums did not magically force individuals to reveal the truth. Instead, subjects often became highly suggestible, confused, and prone to creating fantastical stories or false confessions. The drugs ultimately proved unreliable for legitimate intelligence gathering, but that did not stop the CIA from exploring every possible chemical avenue. Another major focus for MKUltra was sensory deprivation. The CIA wanted to know what would happen to the human brain when it was entirely cut off from the outside world. If you remove sight, sound, and touch, how quickly does a mind break down? To study this, researchers funded experiments involving isolation tanks. Subjects were placed in enclosed, lightless, soundproof containers filled with body temperature salt water, effectively floating in a void. Like I am kind of right now. um, while isolation tanks are used today for relaxation and medication, under MKUltra, the context was very, very different. The goal was to induce psychological distress, hallucinations, and a complete detachment from reality. The CIA believed that after a certain period of profound sensory isolation, a subject's mental defenses would crumble, making them highly receptive to interrogation and behavioral reprogramming. The experiments were brutal. Subjects frequently experienced severe panic, paranoia, and terrifying auditory and visual hallucinations. All of this research, from the mind-bending LSD trips to the torturous sensory deprivation and brainwashing of Dr. Cameron, shared a common thread: an absolute, unwavering belief by the CIA that the human mind was just another machine, a machine that can be hacked, dismantled, and rebuilt to serve the interests of national security. As the 1950s turned into the 1960s, the scope of MKUltra began to intersect with some of the most famous cultural shifts in American history. The CIA's secret illegal drug testing inadvertently helped fuel the 1960s counterculture movement. One of the most mind-boggling connections is that of Ken Kinsley, the celebrated author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In the late 1950s, before he wrote his masterpiece, Ken Kinsley volunteered as a paid test subject for the CIA-funded experiments on psychoactive drugs at the Veterans Hospital at Menlo Park, California. He was given LSD, psilocybin, and other chemicals, and then asked to report his hallucinations or experiences. These experiments deeply influenced Kinsley. They exposed him to massive doses of LSD at a time when the drug was virtually unknown to the general public. Kinsley went on to host his famous acid test parties, where LSD was widely distributed, and formed the counterculture group known as the Merry Pranksters, also known as just another version of hippies at the time. Um, it's striking irony that the CIA's quest to control minds inadvertently helped catalyze the very culture movement that campaigned free love, expanded consciousness, and anti-establishment rebellion. Another disturbing connection from the academic and psychological testing of the era involves Ted Krasinski, who would later become known as the domestic terrorist, the Unabomber. In the late 1950s, while a brilliant but socially isolated student at Harvard University, Kagrinsky was a participant in an extreme psychological study conducted by Dr. Henry Murray. While not directly a part of MKUltra, Murray's research was heavily aligned with the same goals of psychiatrical stress and behavioral manipulation. Kagrinsky and other students were subjected to intense, deliberately humiliating verbal assaults designed to test psychological responses to extreme stress. Many historians and psychologists, long day, um, point to the profound trauma and psychological stress Kagrinsky experienced during these experiments as a catalyst for his later radicalization and random bombings. For 2 decades, the CIA's chemical division operated with nearly limitless funding and zero oversight. But by the early 1970s, the political and cultural landscape of the United States was shifting dramatically. The Vietnam War was tearing the country apart, the Watergate scandal was beginning to unfold, and there was a growing palpable distrust in the US government and intelligence community. Dr. Sidney knew that the political winds were changing, and he feared that the sheer scale of MKUltra experiments would come to light. In the late 1972 and early 1973, Dr. Sidney took a drastic action. Acting on the orders of the past then CIA Director Richard Helms, Dr. Sidney authorized the destruction of a vast majority of the MKUltra. For weeks, CIA employees fed thousands of documents detailing 2 decades of illegal human experimentations, drug testing, and psychological torture through industrial shredders and incinerators. Dr. Sidney hoped that he had destroyed all the evidence, permanently burying the darkest secret of the CIA. For a time, he had succeeded. But secrets this profound rarely stay hidden forever. In 1974, investigative journalist Theodore Hirsch, probably butchering his name again, sorry, published a bombshell article in the New York Times, exposing a massive domestic spying operation conducted by the CIA against anti-war activists and other American citizens. The article, often referred to as Family Jewels, sent shockwaves through the Washington. The public outcry forced the creation of 2 major investigative bodies, the Rockefeller Commission in 1975 and the Church Committee in 1976. These congressional investigations began digging into the illegal activities of the intelligence community. Under immense political pressure, the CIA was forced to admit that Project MKUltra had existed. Dr. Sidney's shredding campaign had been extensive, but it had not been entirely successful. Thousands of financial documents and administrative files had been misfiled or stored in remote locations that survived the 1973 purge. In 1977, the CIA was forced to declassify and release thousands of the surviving documents under the Freedom of Information Act. The release of the MKUltra files was a watershed moment in American history. For the first time, the public learned that the CIA had spent millions of dollars on mind control. They learned about the unknowing citizens dosed with LSD, the safe houses used to observe drug trips, and electroshock torture of psychiatric patients, along with the tragic death of Frank Olson. The American public was horrified. Trust in the intelligence community plummeted, and congressional hearings grilled CIA officials about the lack of oversight and the blatant disregard for human rights and civil liberties. In the end, after 20 years of illegal experimentations, destroying lives, and millions of dollars spent, the CIA's quest for mind control was a catastrophic failure. The agency's own internal reviews concluded that the chemical and biological methods they researched were too unpredictable and unreliable to be used effectively in intelligence operations. The CIA did not discover the secret to controlling human minds. As for the architect of the program, they largely escaped justice. Dr. Sidney retired from the CIA in 1973, just before the files were destroyed, and he was never criminally charged for his role in the deaths or the psychological trauma inflicted on the subjects of MKUltra. He lived out the rest of his life, passing away in 1999 without ever spending a single day in prison for his actions. The victims and their families, however, faced a long, agonizing battle for the truth. Because the CIA had covered its tracks so thoroughly, the declassified documents were heavily redacted, and many of the victims were unable to prove that they were a part of the experiments. While some lawsuits eventually resulted in settlements, many of the people used in the CIA's darkest experiments were left to deal with lifelong trauma, shattered mental health, and a devastating realization that their own government viewed them as expendable pawns in a shadow game of geopolitical paranoia. Thank you for joining me on this video. It is history that is stranger than fiction, a labyrinth of secret safe houses, covert drug experiments, and the chilling exploration of the human mind. The CIA set out to destroy free will, and in the end, they only succeeded in destroying the public's trust and writing one of the most horrifying chapters in modern history. I want to thank you all for joining me on this video. It's my first video back, and I just want to leave you with one final question. Do you think that the CIA abandoned MKUltra, or do you just think they've gotten better at hiding what they're doing? I don't know about you, but that's all for this video. Catch y'all in the next one. Peace.